Welcome back to the channel and to the first round of the WNBA playoffs. We have 4 games on the slate. All 4 series are tipping off today, Sunday, September 22nd. So we're going to break down and analyze each of those games. We'll talk about which way that I'm leaning as far as the points and the spread. We're also going to talk about any player props I found for those games that I like. And then any picks that I put in officially myself, I'm going to list right down there below in that pinned comment. So make sure you check back in. That way you can see if you'd like to ride along with me. But before we get into these games, let's go over what we took on the last day of the regular season and how that ended up going down. We took the Wings on the money line, and we do not hit, man. Vegas does end up pulling out the victory there. And then we took Rakia Jackson over 14.5 points, and she does cash that one early for us. So we go 1-1 on the night to wrap up the season. And man, overall, it was a good season. Started making these videos on June 10th, so we were a little bit behind as far as the WNBA season goes. I think, so we had about a month of action, give or take, before we started making videos, and we finished at 95 and 88 overall, up 9.42 units on the year. So I will definitely take it, man. I'm happy with that. Had a blast making these videos for sure. And I'm super excited going into the playoffs, man. Hopefully we can just keep stacking up on these units more and more. So let's not waste any time. Let's dive right into it. The first game on the slate, it's going to be that 1 p.m. matchup between the Atlanta Dream and the New York Liberty. The Liberty are laying 12.5 in this one for game one, with the over-under sitting at 156.5. The Liberty, they finished the season at 32-8, first in the W, and sitting in the top 3 of many major statistical categories, second for points per game, most made threes per game, third highest shooting percentage, second in rebounds and assists per games, not to mention fourth in both steals and blocks per game as well. So they close out the season with the highest offensive rating at 107, third best defensive rating, and the highest net rating overall, a solid 3.5 points higher than the second-ranked Connecticut Sun. New York is hitting at the highest percentage from the restricted area, third highest in the paint, just outside of the restricted area, and they make the most above the break threes as well. Atlanta, they finished out the season with a win over this Liberty team. It was their first win over New York in 4 tries this year, but that win was an absolute must-win for the Dream in order to make it into these playoffs, and it came against a New York team that played their starters limited minutes, and they had nothing to play for as they had already wrapped up the top seed. So the Dream, they end the regular season at the 8th and final seed with a 15-25 record. Atlanta, they're middle of the pack in terms of points allowed per game, sitting at 5th, giving up just under 80 points per game. They are holding opponents to the lowest shooting percentage from inside the restricted area, and the second fewest makes from just outside the restricted area in the paint. They're giving up the 4th fewest above the break threes, but they are allowing the 4th most three-pointers made overall. The Dream themselves have used their defense to stay in games and get them to this spot here that they're in. They've had one of the worst offenses all season, though. They are last in points per game and overall shooting percentage, second to last for three-point shooting percentage. The Dream are also dishing out the fewest assists per game. They do sit at third for rebounds per game, but New York gives up the second fewest rebounds a game. So take away that throwaway game for New York between these two on Thursday to close out the year, and they've beaten Atlanta by an average of 14.6 points per game in their 3 prior victories. So I like New York at home. But man, I'm not sure I have it in me to fully trust them to cover this spread here. I want to. I'm so close, but I'm not sure I can get there to pull the trigger. New York is above and beyond the better team here. They should pull out a sweep here in this one. But they haven't fared well against these double-digit lines on the year, going just 5-13 against the spread in such cases. But they have now covered in 3 straight games that saw them as double-digit favorites. The thing is, though, Atlanta, they've been double-digit dogs in 6 games this year, and they have only failed to cover in 1 of those, going 5-1 to the number in those 6 games. So I'm leaning New York, but I think it may be too risky for me to want to play this one personally. I'm not sure I get there, but if I had to pick, I'm leaning New York. For the total, I'm going to look at the under. Atlanta had, on the road, they've hit under this mark in 7 of their last 10, while the Liberty have also hit under this mark in 7 of their last 10 at home. Then 3 of the 4 matches between these two hit the under, hit under this line specifically as well. And my only concern for under not hitting here would be an offensive explosion from New York, right? Which is how we saw the one game between these two that ended up going over. That's how it happened. New York put up 96 points in that one. Atlanta, they play well enough defense to slow this New York team down. I just don't trust them to score that much on their end. They got, the worst offense in the league, taking on one of the best defenses in New York. Their team total, it's sitting pretty low at 72.5, but I also wouldn't mind taking a peek at that. But I do think I like the full game under here the most out of everything regarding the total, the spreads, team totals. I do think I like that full game under the most here. Guys, let's jump over here to Outlier. Guys, if you are not on Outlier, make sure you get down into that description of this video and into the pin comment as well. I'll stick it right there at the top of that pin comment. You'll find a link that you can try out Outlier for 7 days for free for yourself. Then at the end of that, you can decide if you'd like to keep it or not. It is $19.99 a month, and it is well worth it, man. Look, if you're just placing small wagers and you're just betting casually for fun, then this might not be for you. But man, if you're trying to make some money, make some profit while you're doing this and having a good time, this is a great tool. And that $19.99 a month, start smacking on these bets, man, it's going to pay itself off pretty quickly. There are so many different options, and we're going to use this a few times throughout the video, so you'll get to see that here. Right now, we're looking at Ryan Howard, her points under 16.5. We can get this right now. If you look over here, it always breaks it down. Outlier does. We can find where the best odds are, get the best price per sports book. So we can get this at Underdog right now for -120. But if you don't have Underdog available in your state, never fear. We can get that on FanDuel for -122 as well. If we pop over here to the right, we can see the Liberty, their points allowed. They sit at third overall. Then against guards, still at third, man. It doesn't jump at all. So we like that there. That's another great thing about Outlier. They color code it for us. If it's green, it's good. If it's red, it's bad, man. If we come down here, still a lot more green, right? In her last 5, she has hit under this mark at a 100% rate, including that last game of the season against the Liberty. We can push it back further just to make sure, we're hitting this at a consistent rate. We're still in the green. We're still hitting at a 60% rate, hitting to the under there. And then looking at this insight here from Outlier, which they're just basically like trends that they'll pop up here and there, depending on player props. And this one here says that she has failed to exceed the 16.5 point mark in 8 of her last 9 games against top 5 defenses for points allowed. You can see down here, man, that's a whole lot of green that we're looking at, right? And that one red is against that Seattle Storm team that really they struggled after the Olympic break. So, that really could play into that there. But like I said, man, New York, one of the top teams against guards for points allowed and just overall in general. So I like this one here. Ryan Howard under 16.5 points. Then next up, we're looking at the 3 p.m. matchup between the Indiana Fever and the Connecticut Sun. The Sun are laying 4.5. We have an over-under sitting at 164. Man, what a first season it was for Caitlin Clark, right? Coming into the league with crazy high, unrealistic expectations, and as the season went on, some of them started to feel much less unrealistic. She's helped resurrect this Fever squad. They hadn't had a 500 or better season since 2016. They hadn't made the playoffs since then either. It's 2024, man, so a solid 8 years that this team has been on rebuild mode. And it was a rough start. It's not like either of those were a given, you know what I mean? That they were going to make the playoffs or having a 500 or above record. They started the year out 1-8, and then they went 19-12 the rest of the way to close out the season. So, and if you take out that little, they had a little 2-4 skid to close out the year, in which they really didn't have too much to play for in that time. They had clinched their playoff spot, and they were locked into the 6th seed for much of those outings. But if we remove that 2-4 at the end of the day, or at the end of the year, they had a nice 17-8 run that put them back into playoff contention. They opened the year against fierce competition as well. Man, I don't think a lot of people were talking about that. 2 games against the Sun and the Liberty to open the year, followed by 2 matches with the Storm, then the Aces. Man, they had a rough schedule to start, especially for a young team that was trying to gel with no real practice time beforehand or during the opening portion of the year. They played 11 games in 20 days, man. There was no time for practice, no time to build any kind of chemistry. So the Olympic break, that was huge for this Fever team. They could take a step back. They got some much-needed rest at first before plenty of team-building exercises that the coaching staff put together. And then, that kind of led into like a mini training camp type deal before play resumed. This allowed them time to create and build on the chemistry that we are seeing between them now. And it's been a beautiful thing, man. Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark in the pick and roll, that itself has become a thing of beauty. And then Clark has developed some great chemistry with Kelsey Mitchell as well, man. Both of them are averaging 23 points per game since the Olympic break. I think they're ranking 2nd and 3rd in the W in that time as far as points per game scored. The Fever, man, they are here and they are ready to compete, but they are still a young team. And as a whole, this team has only played in 19 combined playoff games on with the players on this roster. The Sun, on the other hand, they come into this series with 222 combined games of playoff experience on their roster. They're seeking their first title in franchise history after making and losing the finals 4 times so far in their franchise history, most recently in 2022. Connecticut has rolled out the best defense this season, sitting at first for defensive rating, allowing the lowest amounts of three-pointers and field goals made overall from the opposition. They give up the fewest rebounds and the second fewest assists per game while holding opponents to just over 73 points per game. That is the lowest amount in the W this year. So it's strength versus strength, right? Indiana has turned into one of the best offensive teams in the W over the course of the season. They're third in the league in scoring and three-point shooting percentage. They are first in the W in shooting overall from the field. And in the last 15 games of the year, they were first in all 3 of those categories. Where the Sun can hurt the Fever is going to be in the turnover department. So we have a Sun team full of veterans who are efficient with the ball. They're giving up the third fewest turnovers per game while forcing the most. They lead the W in points scored off of those turnovers, and with Indiana, we have a team that is full of youth, with little to no playoff experience, and one who, while they have improved over the year, still finished the season ninth in turnovers given up and points scored from those turnovers. Connecticut also went out and picked up a scorer in Marina Mabry. She has slid into that first off of the bench role, and she comes in guns a-blazing most nights, man. I think she gives the Sun a more balanced, or the Sun team a more balanced attack offensively. She's going to be key in any kind of run they make here in these playoffs. So these two teams, they've met 4 times over the year, with the Sun winning the first 3 by an average of 14 points. But then the Fever took the last meeting between these two in late August by a score of 84-80. But even in that one, man, what did the Sun do? They forced a ton of turnovers. They had 14 steals alone, but just poor shooting, that led and contributed to this 4-point loss here. So, look, I like the Fever in the series to compete and make things interesting. But I have to lean Connecticut here and this veteran core from the Sun laying just 4.5 points. I think Indiana can and probably will keep this one close early, and potentially throughout the game. But ultimately, I think the Sun will pull away, and I see them cruising to like a 6-7 point victory in this one. Then looking at the total, it can be tough to think about unders, man, when we're talking about the Fever, right? But the Sun have hit under this number here in 8 straight games, and then 4 straight times at home against the Fever. I think the Sun dictate the pace of this game. They slow things down and they frustrate this Fever offense, this young team, and they lead this game to an under. Then let's jump back over here to Outlier. I'm looking at Marina Mabry of the Sun, points over 14.5. Now we can get this at DraftKings right now at -105, also at BetMGM at -105. If we look over here at the Fever against guards and their points allowed, they are sitting at dead last. Now let's look at Marina Mabry in her last 5. She has hit this at a 60% rate, 3 out of 5. If we look at her in her last 10, also hitting at a 60% rate. But if we look at her head-to-head against the Fever, man, she is smoking them, right? 7 of her last 8, she has gone over that mark, hitting at an 88% rate. She's played them 4 times this year, 3 times with Chicago, and then 1 time with Connecticut. She has hit 3 out of the 4 times, hitting for a 75% rate on the year against this Fever team, who, like I said, sitting at dead last for points allowed towards guards. So, like this one here, Marina Mabry, points over 14.5. If you guys have been watching these videos, you know that we have cashed on this prop a handful of times. Then I'm also going to be looking at Dewana Bonner of the Sun. Her points and rebounds under 20.5. We can get this at Bet365 for -130. Now, if we look at her in her last 5 games, she has smacked under this number at a 100% hit rate. And then let's push it back just, to 10 games. Let's see how consistent we're hitting this. Still at a 90% rate. And then even in her last 20, we're still in the green here. 12 out of 20 times for a 60% hit rate here. Still a good bit of green down there. And if we look at this insight from Outlier, she has failed to hit over this number, this 20.5 points and rebounds mark, in 4 of her last 5 at home for an 80% hit rate as well. And if we look at the Fever against forwards, for points and rebounds allowed, they are only sitting at 10th, right? But Rwanda, for whatever reason, has not been scoring nearly as much. Maybe because of the addition of Marina Mabry, just not as many shots to go around. But her scoring output has dropped, so I'm not too concerned with that there. And then for rebounds allowed, man, the Fever actually are a very good rebounding team. They are sitting at second for rebounds allowed against forwards. So I do like this one here. Dewana Bonner under 20.5 points plus rebounds. Like I said, we can get that at bet 365 right now for minus 130. Then the last one I'm looking at on this game is going to be Kelsey Mitchell of the Fever. Her points over 19.5. And we can get this at BetMGM right now for the best price of minus 110. Now, this one does come with a little bit of risk. It is a little scary because of Connecticut's defense, man. They are first overall against guards for points allowed, just first overall for points allowed, period. They have that stout defense that we talked about, right? And head to head, Mitchell has had some troubles with them over the course of the last couple seasons now, hitting under this mark at a 75% rate. But in that last game, she did eclipse this mark, and this one was in late August, where these other three were, June 10th and before. At the beginning of the season, when the Fever were struggling and just didn't have that same chemistry that we have spoke about, and just here in this video as well. So I'm not as concerned with this as the numbers would appear, right? Because if we look over here in her last 5, she's hit over this mark at an 80% rate, right? We look at it in her last 10, still at 80% rate. And we can go back even to her last 20 games, and she is still hitting over this number at a 75% rate, 15 out of 20. That is a whole lot of green down there, guys. And then if we look at this insight from Outlier, it's just a whole lot more green. Like I said, 86% in her last 14 games. She has hit 12 out of 14 times. So I like this one here, man, and we can get it for a good price at minus 110. I definitely think it's worth a flyer. Next up, we have the 5 p.m. matchup between the Mercury and the Minnesota Lynx. Lynx are laying 9.5, over under sitting at 158.5. Lynx are laying 10.5 on some sports books as well. So just definitely shop around, try to get the best price for this one, especially if you're on the Lynx side, right? But the Lynx, they came out of the Olympic break on a mission. They went 13-2 down the stretch, securing the 2 seed. They have the 4th highest offensive rating with the 2nd highest defensive rating. That's all good for the 3rd best overall net rating in the W. They finished the year shooting at the 4th highest overall percentage from the field and the highest percentage from deep in the W. Minnesota won 4 titles between 2011 and 2017, and they have been trying to get back to the finals ever since, failing to advance past the 2nd round at any point in that time. So they come into this playoffs on a mission too. The Mercury, they came into the season with higher expectations than what the results would end up netting. Kyle Copper, Becca Allen, and Natasha Cloud, they all joined Phoenix in the offseason to team with Brittany Griner, Diana Taurasi to form a star-studded roster. But things never consistently clicked throughout the season. Some nights the Mercury would blow teams out of the building with big, like 90-plus, 100-plus even scoring nights. But if the outside shot wasn't falling, this Mercury team struggled. Just throughout the season, that's been the case. The Mercury were just 6-9 after the Olympic break, backing into these playoffs at the 7th seed. So Minnesota, they lead the W in assists this season. They were 2nd in steals and points scored off of turnovers. They're 3rd in fast break scoring. Phoenix was just a middle of the pack 6 in terms of giving up turnovers, while sitting at 7th for both opponents' points scored off of those turnovers and fast break points scored. In their 4 meetings this year, the Lynx won 3 times, losing just once in Phoenix by 1 point. And Kyle Copper exploded in that one for 34 points to help them get that 1-point victory. The Lynx won each of the other 3 games by double digits by an average of just over 13 points per game. So I like the Lynx here, but I'm not a fan of that line, man. And it's moved back and forth. Like I said, I've seen it up to 10.5 so far as well. It's too many points for me to want to lay in a game 1, but I do think the Lynx win this game, and without much sweat as well. So I'll lean Minnesota, but like I said, I'm not sure I get there with this high of a number. Find a 7.5 or 8.5 even, man. I'd feel a little bit better, but I don't know. It feels like a lot for a game 1, even with the Phoenix struggles, man. They do have the capability of putting the ball in the basket, and there's always that, chance that they do have a hot day offensively and from the perimeter. So, like I said, too many points for me to feel comfortable getting behind, but I definitely think Minnesota wins this game. And then looking at the total, I think if you're looking at Minnesota to win the game, you got to look at the under. I could see their defense giving Phoenix fits here, but, and the Lynx have hit under this number in 4 of their last 5 overall and 7 of their last 10 at home. But this is another one where I just don't feel too strongly about this. Because you could make the case for the overhitting as well, man. Both these if Minnesota shoots the best percentage from deep, and like I said, Phoenix can heat up at times. I don't know, man. It's not one that I feel comfortable with either way or feel really confident in. So I would lean under, but definitely not going to make any moves on that one. Then we'll jump back over here to Outlier. I'm looking at Courtney Williams of the Lynx for points and assists over 15.5. And we can get this at Bet365 for the best price at minus 115. If we look at the Mercury against guards, they are sitting at a middle of the pack 6 for points allowed, and they are second to last for assists allowed. And if we look at this insight here from Outlier, Courtney Williams has exceeded this number in 14 of her last 17 games overall for an 82% hit rate in those last 17 games. So you gotta like that there. And if we look at it just a little bit closer, man, her last 5, she's hit 4 out of her last 5 for an 80% rate. So I like this one here, man. Courtney Williams for points and assists over 15.5. Then I'm also looking at Diana Taurasi of the Mercury, her points under 14.5. We can get this one at underdog for minus 120, but if you do not have underdog, you can find this on BetMGM for minus 125. Now, the Lynx overall for points allowed sitting at second, and then against guards, they are also second in the league, so we love that there. If you look at this in her last 5 games, Diana Taurasi has hit this mark, under this mark, at a 60% rate, right? In her last 10, even better, we're sitting at a 70% rate. Okay, 7 out of 10 times. And if we look at her head-to-head against this Minnesota Lynx team, now a 67% rate, 4 out of 6 times, but on the year so far, we'll start right here. This is where this season starts. 3 out of 4 times she has hit under this mark, and just over that mark the one time she gets over. It's not like she creamed the number or anything there. And then looking at this insight here from Outlier, she has failed to exceed this 14.5 point mark in 13 of her last 17 games versus top 5 defenses. So a lot of green down here as well. So we can find this one, like I said, under 14.5. We can get this at underdog at minus 120 or bet MGM at minus 125. Then next up, we're going to be looking at Ka Copper, her rebounds over 3.5. Now we can get this one at BetMGM for minus 130. Now Minnesota against guards is just sitting at 9th for rebounds allowed, so we like that there. And looking at her last 5, she has hit over this mark at a 60% rate. And if we push it back further to the last 10, she is smacked over at a 70% rate, 7 out of 10 times. Looking at her head-to-head against this Minnesota team, now on the year, she has hit 3 out of 4 times, including the last 3 games. And, just over the last couple seasons, she has now hit at a 71% rate, 5 out of 7 times over this Minnesota team. And then looking at this insight from Outlier, she has exceeded this 3.5 point mark in 10 of her last 11 games when it comes to playing teams that are in the bottom 5 for rebounds allowed. That last one against the Seattle Storm is the only game that she has come in under this mark. And just kind of clearing that number pretty well in a handful of these games here. So you got to like this mark here. Kalia Copper, man, over 3.5 rebounds at minus 130 odds. And then last up, I'm looking at the 10 p.m. game between the Seattle Storm and the Las Vegas Aces. Now, the Aces are now laying 9 points with the over-under sitting at 162. These two both went on streaks at times throughout the season, going cold at other times, getting hot at times. But one got hot heading into these playoffs while the other has cooled off in a sense, right? The Storm went 3-6 out of the Olympic break before running off 5 wins in 6 games to close out the year. But this is the team that I feel like has kind of gone cold coming into the playoffs. I'm not buying those 5 wins in 6 games, man. Let's take a closer look at those 5 victories. The Mercury twice, the Sparks twice, and the Dallas Wings. So the 2 worst teams in the W, and then one that struggled tremendously after the Olympic break. So guess who that one loss was in that 6-game stretch? That's right, the Las Vegas Aces. And they stumbled to a 2-4 record coming out of the break, but then they finished the year winning 9 of their last 10 with 2 wins over the Sun, 1 in Connecticut, and then 2 wins in Indiana over the Fever. So the Aces are playing much better basketball as a unit than the Seattle team. The Aces, they finished the season shooting the 4th highest shooting percentage from deep, the 2nd highest percentage overall from the field, and that was all good for a first in the W, 86 points per game. They were the most efficient team in the league with the ball, giving up the fewest turnovers per game. Vegas is shooting the highest percentage from the W from outside of the restricted area in the paint, and then the 2nd highest percentage from the mid-range while hitting the most corner threes per game and shooting the above-the-break 3 at a 4th highest shooting percentage. Ezzy Mabagor is also out for this game, still working her way back from a concussion, and this just does not bode well for Seattle. She's averaged just under 12 points per game and 8 rebounds per game, and she is a force defensively. These two, they played 4 times on the year. The Storm took the first match by 13. They had big games from Jewel Lloyd and Skylar Diggins-Smith, both of who scored over 20 points each in those games, but they also got a big game from Magbagor in that one. She had 14 points to go along with a game-high 15 rebounds. Vegas also shot just 27% from deep in that one and just 31% overall. The Aces then took the next 3 over the season against the Storm, winning those on average by about 9 points per game. With that in mind, with the injury of Ezzy Mabagor in mind as well, give me the Aces laying the 9. I'm not sure I'll get there with it though. I liked it better at 7.5, and I wish that I would have took it then when it was still available. But I'm still leaning Vegas. I can't look any way but their way here in this one for game 1. And then for the total, I definitely like the under here as well. So it looks like I'm leaning under in all of these games so far. So comment under if you made it this far into the video, guys. I love to see who stuck around for the whole thing, and I appreciate all of you that do. But the last meeting between these two, it just took place this past Tuesday, and we landed under this number in that one. The Storm have hit under in 3 of their last 4, and then the Aces have hit under this number in 7 of their last 8. So yeah, I'm going to lean under for this one as well. And then I don't see any player props that I like for this game either. So that is going to wrap it up here for the first game 1s of the first round of the WNBA playoffs. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you found it helpful and useful. And if you did, please do not forget to smash that like button right down there below and hit subscribe if you have not already. That way you don't miss out on any of the content that we are dropping. And that's going to do it, guys. Best of luck. Hope we make a little bit of bread, and I will see you on the next video.